All right, and we are live on the newest episode of the Eurosnob podcast. My name is Alex John, joined as always by my co-host Ian Smith, and we've got a special guest today, someone that I've met through Twitter, and Arsenal Twitter seems to unite us all. Zach Taylor. Zach, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And Ian, how you doing today, buddy?
Not too bad, man. Keeping busy, especially with a 2.5-month-old.
I was gonna say that a lot of sleepless nights on your end, I'm guessing.
You know, it hasn't been too bad. It really hasn't been too bad. The last couple of nights, a little rough, but he's growing. It's got to be a growth spurt, man. That kid's eating more than I do, so it's crazy right now.
Yeah, I can imagine. And Zach, obviously because it's your first time on, why don't you just give everyone kind of your background in soccer, how you became an Arsenal fan, and following a team in the Premier League in the United States.
Yeah, so I grew up on the Gulf Coast of Alabama, not the biggest soccer community, and played my entire life through club and high school and intercollegiate college over at South Alabama, and it's always just been a part of my life. It's either soccer and Zach. That's the only two things I know that go together. As for Arsenal, I graduated high school in 2007. And right around that time was the first, Arsenal in the Champions League final. And that was the first game that I ever saw on TV from Europe, just because being where I was from, it was really hard to get it on TV. And ever since that Henry goal, I was kind of hooked. And I've been following them ever since and living the misery and pain and sorrow ever since.
It's funny you say that because we all kind of became fans right around the same time where we didn't get to catch the Invincibles years on TV. We all kind of caught the aftermath of that with the stadium rebuild and all that. So I guess we're all kind of cursed in the same way. But hopefully, this season we see a little bit of a rebound on that front. But just kind of getting into a general preview of the Premier League before we go too heavy into Arsenal. Obviously, the main story coming out of last season was Manchester City and just how dominant they were, finishing 19 points ahead of Manchester United in second place. Ian, I'll start with you. Do you think with the additions that City's made, it's really just been Riyad Mahrez, but also another year in Pep's system? Do you think that type of form is replicable? I mean, or do you think that eventually they're going to come at least slightly back to the pack? And then Zach, if you could jump in after Ian on that one.
I mean, what do they really have to do this summer? I mean, that the squad that they put together last year is as good as any squad, really, in my opinion, in the world. They may, they don't have a Messi or a Ronaldo, but they're as good as any squad out there. Are they going to win the Premier League by as wide a margin this year? No. Are they going to win the Premier League? There's zero doubt in my mind that they will. They're just too deep. They're too strong. And then, like you said, they add a player like Riyad Mahrez to that, and they're just an unbelievable side.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to 100% agree. I don't think they win at 19 points clear, but they're so incredibly deep. Even their bench are international stars. Riyad Mahrez, obviously a star. I kind of question his motivation going over City, but either way, in Pep's system for another year, they're just too loaded. There's too much to go there.
And the thing that I kind of think about that squad is it's really hard to pinpoint a weakness. I guess if you were being super critical, you might say center back, but honestly, John Stones really came on last season. Otamendi had a good season. They have Laporta, who they signed in January. They still have Vincent Kompany, so they have some different pieces that they can kind of mix in and out and rotate. I mean, they basically had the equivalent of two full-strength squads if you think about it. You substitute out a Sergio Aguero, you bring in a Gabriel Jesus. You substitute David Silva, you bring in Gundogan and De Bruyne and Sané, Sterling. Bernardo Silva, I mean, is even going to get much time this season. That's how deep they are. So, obviously they come into the season as kind of the prohibitive favorites. Then you look at the rest of the pack and you start with Manchester United, Liverpool, Tottenham, and then, of course, the teams with new managers, Chelsea and Arsenal. I mean, starting with Liverpool, with the additions they've made and at the spots that they've addressed, are they the clear-cut number two, or do you still have some questions about them?
I for one still have some questions about them. I really second guess the decision to try and go, especially over to Juve. I really second guess that. Naby Keita is a good player, but at Leipzig, I really kind of think he's unproven at the very, very top. And I don't think Alisson Becker, the new goalkeeper, is going to be that much of an upgrade on Karius. So I still second guess them over the long term. They had a great Champions League. Mo Salah had a fantastic year, but I don't know if they have the depth and real rigidity to last in the Premier League at that level.
For me, they still lack that midfield creator. They know that because with their tactics, they generally just bypass their midfield. So as long as they can continue to be successful doing that and not needing to create in the middle, I think they're probably going to be fine. Other than the lack of midfield creator, I question their depth a little bit. Like you said, Naby Keita is going to be a big addition for them. I personally think that he's between him and who else do they add there? Fabinho in the center of the pitch. I think they're going to be fine to cover up what they're going to lose in Emre Can. And I do think that the goalkeeper coming in, Alisson, is going to be quite a bit better. I think he's a little bit overhyped. Certainly was, the fee that they paid was a little bit crazy, but he's kind of seen as the next best, the next best keeper in the world. So he's certainly going to be an upgrade there. I see them definitely as the clear-cut number 2 team, assuming they stay pretty healthy. I mean, an injury to Salah or, really any one of those front 3, and they could be in some trouble. That's where my big concern falls for them is I don't think they have the depth in the creative areas. But really, I don't think they have the depth anywhere on the field. It's kind of the same way I feel about Spurs.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up the depth because I think that Oxlade-Chamberlain injury hurts them a lot more than people realize because Oxlade-Chamberlain was the guy who could fill in center midfield. You saw that in their tie against Manchester City in the Champions League, but he could fill in on the wings. And I do think that there's going to be a regression to the mean for Salah. I don't think he can put up those types of numbers again. I think the numbers are going to balance out at some point. And you can't really rely on Salah, Mane, and Firmino all staying healthy all season. And they got pretty lucky, bar one Mane injury last season. They got pretty lucky with that. I think Keita is obviously going to be an upgrade on Wijnaldum in that position. I think he does have a little bit of that ability to play through the lines, and he does have some creativity. He's not quite the defense splitter that Mesut Ozil is. That their defense, I think it's good, but not great. I don't think Lovren is necessarily well equipped to be Van Dijk's partner, to be, as much as Lovren thinks he's great. And he said that during the World Cup, self-proclaimed one of the best defenders in the world. I think Van Dijk, you know what you're getting with him. I do like their fullback, Robertson, the left back. I think he's very impressive. For me, they're probably my number 2, because I do think they at least address their midfield to some extent, but I just don't think that you can create that same amount of goals every season while still being so defensively open. And it's interesting that we've all kind of, well, at least, Ian and I, we both think that Liverpool are going to be number 2. Obviously, last season's number 2, Manchester United, and, we're entering third year Mourinho. And, we all know how that tends to work out. Most recent example is at Chelsea when he didn't even make it through Christmas, I don't believe. So do we foresee that happening? Because, you look at United's squad, on paper, it should be pretty strong. Lukaku, Alexis, Pogba, you added Fred to the mix. But they haven't really added too much else. They added Dalot, the Portuguese fullback. Are we going to see peak third year Mourinho, Ian?
Oh, 100%. It's already starting. It's going to be an absolute dumpster fire over there this season. I think he makes it through the whole season, or at least close to it. I really hope he does, because by Christmas they're going to be up in flames. He's already alienating his squad. He's, going off on Martial for missing training after he had a kid, which, quite frankly, if that's really what's going on, what's being reported, every other player in that locker room has got to be turning their head saying, like, what the hell is going on here, right? Because if he's doing it to Martial, he's going to do it to somebody else. So that locker room is really kind of teetering on an edge, and I'm really curious to see what happens with Pogba. There's clearly something going on there. Whether he's gonna go, I don't know. I mean, there's really one more day in the English transfer window as far as bringing players in. Tomorrow is the deadline. We are recording this on Wednesday the 8th, so any big transfers that happen tomorrow, being Thursday, we obviously don't know that yet. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him leave and really stick United with a big hole in their side. I think they're gonna crash and burn this year.
Zach, what about you? What's your take on the third-year Mourinho effect? Are we overstating it? Because to Ian's point, he brought up the Martial situation. Then you had Alexis come out recently and talk about how they need to sign more big players and how Barcelona had signed Vidal, and that's what they should have been doing. It just seems like all the elements are there for a combustion.
I mean, absolutely. Ian taking the words out of my mouth. It's peak dumpster fire for United. If Mourinho wants to make that big of a deal about Martial, I'll take him in Arsenal. We need a winger anyway. I mean, Alexis, we already know, is divisive in the locker room. Lukaku's a fantastic striker, but I don't think he has enough support. Pogba's always, more worried about himself, his haircut, his moves, and actually being an end product player, especially since moving over from Juve. He's never really done it at United on either stint. Aside from that, I don't think their defense is that great. Goalkeeping, probably one of the best goalkeepers in the league, but with Mourinho at the helm, year 3, all this divisiveness in the locker room, I'd be surprised if they finish top 5.
So you're pegging them for the big fall then?
Absolutely. Because I don't think they have enough players on their squad that'll just, as I say, grab it by the skin of the neck and really pull them across the line. I don't think they have that kind of leadership from the training staff, from Mourinho, from the senior players. I don't think they have enough to really make a challenge. The fact that they finished second last year, I think, was more luck than it was actual talent. 19 points off. I mean, they didn't challenge. It was kind of like Arsenal when we finished second to Leicester. We didn't challenge. We just finished second and then still bragged on it. So I wouldn't really say that they're in any point ready to challenge for the top 4. Not for me.
Yeah, I have to. Sorry to cut in, but I got to agree with you completely there that they really don't have that player that when stuff starts to go wrong is going to step up. Somebody that you can see being that leader. They all just kind of seem like passengers on that team. So I'm completely with you there, and I also agree. I think they're probably going to come in and finish 6th this year, in my opinion.
I think the question is the Pogba. Which Pogba are you going to get? Are you going to get the Pogba that helped France win a World Cup and had his defensive responsibilities? On the flip side is he doesn't have Conte next to him. He's got Matic, who's a good player, but I wouldn't say Matic is at that level. I can't say I know much about Fred, so I'm not going to speak to that. But they don't really have a creator in that team. Juan Mata is really the one creative guy they have, and he doesn't start most games. They usually go with Rashford and Lukaku and Lingard up top, or Alexis on the left and Lingard. So I'm not sure where the creativity is going to come from. And they really kind of overperformed in terms of their stats last season with the amount of saves that De Gea had to make. I think he really kind of covered up a lot of flaws in that team. So it wouldn't shock me to see them have a big fall. I mean, they have a lot of talent, but there's a lot of unrest due to the transfer situation. And speaking of the transfer situation, the other 2 clubs in the top 6 besides Arsenal, we look at Tottenham, who haven't made a single signing at all, I think, or at least not one of note. And then you have Chelsea, who had obviously the sale of Thibaut Courtois today. They brought in Kepa from Athletic Bilbao. So, big change in goalkeeper. They look like they're going to hold on to Hazard and Willian. We'll start with Spurs, but then also Chelsea. Zach, with Spurs, I feel like if you're not if you're not adding pieces, you're regressing. You know, I don't think you can stay stagnant in the Premier League with the kind of money there is, with the type of players and coaches that there are. I don't think you can just presume that the formula that worked one year is going to work the next year without any additions. I think that they could be in a little bit of trouble too, especially with guys coming off a long World Cup. And, you know, in the event that Harry Kane ever has a downturn in form, I'm not sure I see enough in that squad to really cover for it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Trying to be as unbiased as possible answering here, talking about Spurs. You're absolutely right. They've reloaded the guns, but they haven't bought anything new. They haven't really went out there and said, you know, we're a real player, made that financial statement. And even if it was somebody, you know, that we hadn't heard of necessarily as a mainstream player, they haven't even went out and signed really anybody of note. Just like you're saying, Harry Kane, as much as I hate to admit it, is a phenomenal number 9. You know, Son's good. Dele Alli, as dirty as he is a great player. But they lack that cutting edge, and I could actually see them having that same new stadium effect that Arsenal had moving to the Emirates. Moving over to this new stadium, not spending as much money, not really deepening the squad with any true talent. I could really see them regressing over the next 2 to 4 years. I don't think they'll drift off too much this season because they haven't lost anybody major, but in the coming seasons, I really think so. And in terms of this particular season, I think it's perennial Spurs. I mean, they never really make that next step. What's it been, 40 some odd years since a title? I mean, they never make that real challenge. It's peak Spurs, I guess I should say.
Yeah, it really is going to be more of the same for them. I'm actually surprised that their team didn't take a bigger hit this summer. I saw, I kind of coming into the summer thought you would see Dele Alli and Christian Eriksen move on to some bigger teams. It's going to happen. There's no way that they're going to continue going on the way that they are with these players being paid the wages that we know they're being paid. We know that they're not on par with Arsenal and Chelsea and United. As far as wages, they're just not on the same level as that. So these players are going to want their money. You're already starting to see a little bit of unrest in the side. Danny Rose is unhappy. I think Alderweireld is unhappy. Guys that are definitely being rumored and are pushing. I think Rose even came out and said it publicly that he wants out. At least something to that effect. So you're kind of starting to see not cracks, but something kind of that just is a little bit off there. There's a little bit of unhappiness in that dressing room. There has to be. I mean, these guys, they've been close the last couple of years. They've put together a couple of really, really good seasons, as much as I don't like to admit it. And they've been looking, they've really been lacking just one or two more pieces. Another guy in center midfield, another guy that can help, Harry Kane score some goals. That can help take some of that responsibility off of him. You add those two things to that squad over the last 2 years, and they probably wouldn't have won the title last year, but they could have won something, right? They've been close. And the fact that they haven't strengthened is got to be getting to those guys in that locker room.
And I think the other thing with them is that they've been known as kind of the plucky underdogs for so long. They've been that team that, they've got all the young English players and we should be so proud of them because they what does it say? They kept it close, or they put the pressure on. That's what they get excited about at Spurs. They put the pressure on, but at some point you have to make that transition from underdog to contender. You can have a couple good seasons because everything kind of breaks your way, but they really haven't had to face any adversity. And I think at some point they're going to have that issue. And I think it could be this season. I really think at some point they are going to underperform. And, maybe it is the Arsenal fan and me being a little bit biased. I'm not sure, but I think there are some teams that could catch them. I mean, I think Chelsea and them are really along with Arsenal competing for those last, couple of Champions League spots. Chelsea coming in with the new manager, new style of play, and then, guys like Jorginho. And, we just don't know how that's going to work out on that end as well. How quickly can you really pick up such a complicated style of play? But just, kind of moving past the top six, just getting some general predictions on the Premier League before we transition to Arsenal. Who are kind of your surprise teams that you think might overperform expectations? And I'll start there. I think for me, and it's weird to say about a newly promoted team, but I really think Wolves could do some damage, not necessarily in terms of getting in the top 6, but at least getting in the top end of the table. I think, they won the championship at a pretty comfortable margin last year. And now they have this, this arrangement with Jorge Mendes, who's bringing in a lot of these Portuguese players like João Moutinho, Rui Patricio. They signed Adama Traore. They've made a lot of really intelligent signings. So for me, not only do I think are they going to be safe, I think they could be kind of my surprise team to rise up the table. But what about you, Ian? Who are you looking out for?
I mean, as far as a surprise team, I don't know that I necessarily have anybody that's going to really surprise me. I like what you're saying about Wolves. They've added some interesting pieces, but it's just going to be, we've seen it before where teams do that. They get promoted and they add some interesting pieces and they never really put it together. So I'm curious to see how that goes. I think they'll be okay. As far as a surprise, I think Fulham is going to impress some people. I like what Huddersfield has got going on over there. So I think those are Fulham and Huddersfield are teams that I think you could see start to cement themselves as a mid-table Premier League team for mid-table Premier League sides for a while here.
Zach, what about you?
I kind of would. I'm interested to see what's going to happen with Wolverhampton this season. It's almost a little bit fishy how Jorge Mendes is pulling these players in, to a newly promoted team, where even the ones that signed last season playing in the championship when their caliber was far above the championship. That's why they ran away with it so easily. I'm very excited to see them. I don't know how far they can go up. I think maybe 8th place might be something that they could work for. They might be able to challenge for a Europa League spot at a very, very, very long shot. But I'm very excited to see them this season. Aside from that, I think the signing of the summer has been Crystal Palace with Max Meyer. I mean, I think he's going to make a day one change in the way their midfield functions. And I can't wait to see them. And I want to see how exactly the training staff treats that signing and how they integrate him into the team. Aside from that, Everton, I'm really excited to see them. I've been seeing this goal come around Twitter and Facebook the last couple of days, the assist from Walcott into, I think it's Cenk Tosun, the Turkish player, and it was an absolute fantastic finish. And I'm really excited to see them this season.
And a couple other teams, that we've heard a lot of noise from this summer. You brought up Everton. They've come up with a few really big name signings. They're obviously their big purchase was Richarlison. You've also got Bernard coming in. They're supposedly signing Yerry Mina from Barcelona and Lucas Digne from Barcelona. There's a rumor they might go for Andre Gomes, also from Barcelona. I think they're just going for all the Barcelona cast-offs. But for a team like Everton, that's not a bad market to work in, honestly. Kind of these guys who couldn't quite hack it at top clubs, but still have something to provide. And the other team that I'm a little conflicted on is West Ham. West Ham's been really, really busy in this transfer window. You brought in Jack Wilshere, you brought in Yarmolenko from Dortmund, you brought in what's his name? You brought in Felipe Anderson from Lazio, who I think is pretty well suited to the Premier League. I mean, I think they're a team that can kind of sneak up into that top 10. But for all these teams we're talking about surprising, what about disappointments? I mean, I know you guys have both kind of hinted at Manchester United. Is that the direction you're going as your most disappointing team, or are we looking elsewhere there?
Yeah, definitely United on a large sense, like a larger sense. United is a disappointment because they're going to struggle, in my opinion. The other team that I think might have a bit of a rough year that I guess could go in as a disappointment would be Leicester City. The magic is worn off, and Vardy, is he going to keep doing what he's doing? I mean, what he has been doing, scoring those kind of goals, losing, Mahrez is going to be a huge loss for them. The question, really in that situation, they're going to need somebody like Damari Gray to really step up and kind of replace him. But, the question there is, can he do it? I don't know that they have necessarily done enough to strengthen them to stay in the top half of the table. And I could see it going bad quickly for them, especially if Jamie Vardy just doesn't have it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to touch on the same thing with Leicester. It was a lot of fun watching them. The whole Jamie Vardy's having a party. I mean, that was a lot of fun. But I liken Mo Salah this season to Jamie Vardy in, second year. It's going to be a lot of, mediocrity. Leicester's fun. Jamie Vardy's a fun player to follow on Twitter and follow in the league. But we all know that it was just a magic season. They're not going to come back and do the same thing. They're not even, signing players that can even take them close. I'd be surprised if they finish top half this season. And, of course, love to hate them. Manchester United, we've already discussed, they're going to be an absolute disappointment, in my opinion.
Yeah, the team for me, and this isn't really a major disappointment, but I think Newcastle is really in some trouble. They really have not added any players of note. They haven't addressed their needs. Mike Ashley he's just not an owner that you can trust to get anything done. So I think they're going to struggle. I think I kind of echo what you guys are saying about Manchester United. I think despite their talent, there's a huge potential for a combustion. If they don't start the season strong, considering the mood that Mourinho's been in and a lot of the infighting, I think that could be a real struggle. But kind of wrapping up the Premier League talk before we get into Arsenal, let's get some predictions from you guys about your predicted champion, top four, Golden Boot winner, and relegated teams. And I'll start there. For my champion, I've got Manchester City. I've got Liverpool finishing second. I think I've got Chelsea finishing third, Arsenal fourth, Tottenham fifth, United sixth. Golden Boot winner, I'm going to go for Aubameyang. I really think at the rate he was scoring last season, that's a legitimate possibility. And then my relegated teams, I think Cardiff has no chance of staying up. They've added nobody really. They don't have the budget, and they don't play a style that's really conducive to staying up. I think Cardiff goes down. I think Bournemouth is in real trouble. I think they go down. And then I've actually got a bad feeling about Huddersfield. I'm just not sure they have the quality and attack to stay up because they really kind of had to defend for their lives last season to stay up. And I'm just not sure you can replicate that. But Zach, what about you? Top four relegated teams and Golden Boot winner.
Yeah, I'd have to say Manchester City are the clear-cut favorites this season. I don't think Liverpool, they're not my number two just because of their depth issues. I say Chelsea in second, Arsenal in third, and then Liverpool sneaking back in at fourth. I think Liverpool will put too much pressure or too much focus onto Europe again. I've got Spurs fifth and United sixth, just the same. In terms of relegation, kind of similar. But as much as I like Fulham and I like what they're doing, I don't think they have the firepower. Fulham, Bournemouth, and Cardiff are the three for me for a lot of the same reasons. In terms of Golden Boot, as much as I hate to even say his name, I think Harry Kane wins it. He's really, really talented, although I don't think he's enough of a team player to lead Tottenham off the table. I think he'll score enough goals on his own and enough penalties to lead him to the Golden Boot.
Yep, I'm going to make it 3 for 3. City takes the title. I do like Liverpool coming in second, but what you said there, Zach, about them putting too much attention on Europe, that could certainly be, a downfall for them if they do get themselves into some injury troubles there. So I could see them not finishing there, but I think they'll be fine. I think they come into second. Arsenal I've got coming in third. Chelsea fourth. The only reason for Chelsea coming in fourth, it's going to take them a little bit to adjust to their new style of play. I think they're going to get off to a slow start, and they're going to finish the second half of the season really strong and come in fourth. Spurs fifth, and we've touched on United coming 6th. Look for Everton even to kind of come close and really push United for that 6th spot. Not expecting United to fall out of the top 6, but I could see that happening. I could see West Ham, Crystal Palace, teams like that, those mid-table teams that have the potential to win some games, to really challenge United for that 6th spot. Going down, I've got Cardiff. Again, kind of 3 for 3 there. I don't think Burnley really has enough attacking power to maintain it for another year. I mean, they defend well, but I think they're going to really, really struggle to score again this year. So I could really see them going down. And Leicester City, I could easily see them going down this year. So and it's a little bit different on a couple of those teams, but I like to mix it up a little bit.
Bold statement here.
I was gonna say that's a pretty surprising pick there. And then what about your Golden Boot winner?
I think Salah's going to be up there again. I don't think last season was a fluke. He's going to challenge for that spot. Harry Kane, Aubameyang. I hope it's Aubameyang. So I'm going to go on a positive note and say he's going to take it. We'll get into a little bit why I think that might actually happen, but I think he certainly has a shot at it. So we're going to go with Aubameyang.
And we all kind of had Arsenal in the top 4, which is interesting for a club coming in with a new manager. We're obviously going to get into some of the off the field issues in a little bit, but Zach, because we haven't had you on before, what's kind of been your thought about Arsenal's summer so far? Again, we're recording this on Wednesday, so if you don't hear something, if some transfer goes down tomorrow on deadline day and we didn't discuss it, it's because we didn't know about it because it hasn't happened yet. So just, looking at the summer, we've got Matteo Guendouzi, Lucas Torreira, Stefan Lichtsteiner, Baron Leno, and Socrates Papastathopoulos. And I got that right on the first try, so good for me. How do you kind of assess this summer, not just the transfers in, but, what you've seen in preseason and how the team has played? Just your general thoughts before we get into some specifics.
Well, first off, bravo. I'm not even going to attempt it. I'm just going to say Socrates. I think we had a relatively positive summer. I'm glad we got a lot of the business done early. I know in the later Wenger years, it was a lot of panic buys at the end, and it was, very, very tough at that point in time. Or let's say the summer that we only signed Petr Cech. I mean, I really enjoyed the fact that we got a lot of our business done early, but I don't think it's quite enough. Not yet. Starting at goalkeeper, Baron Leno, he's amazing. I think he's got a fantastic reactions, especially for the way shots just kind of ping around the box in the Premier League, especially against those mid to lower level teams that just kind of lump the box in there. He's really, really confident. I liken him to how Wojciech Szczesny was in terms of his confidence. He might not be there technically as Petr Cech is, but what he makes up for with what he doesn't have technically, he's confident in the air. He's confident coming for the ball. And what I saw him at Leverkusen, he really controls his defense. I'm excited to see him. I hope that he's the clear-cut number 1. Of course, time will tell, but I'm really excited for him. As for Socrates, I honestly think that was a poor choice. I don't think he's had a particularly fantastic preseason. He looks very slow. Very, very slow. And all of the top 4 attacks that we're going to be playing against and challenging for the title have a lot of speed up top. So between him and a Mustafi that's very overzealous into the challenge, I'm really worried about our defense. I was very impressed with Demagogue Vida in the World Cup. So if we do end up picking him up tomorrow, I would honestly prefer Vida to start over at least Mustafi, if not Socrates as well, just because I haven't been impressed with him. I did pay a close attention to Torreira in the World Cup and, of course, all the training videos that came out this summer. He looks like an absolute superstar. He also looks like a 17-year-old kid, but I think he brings a lot of something different. If that's the way I can say it, is nobody's going to know what he's going to do. He wasn't a big name. I had to look him up on FIFA, to find out anything about him when I first heard his name. And I'm really excited for Stefan Lichtsteiner. I honestly think he's a better choice for the Premier League games than Bellerin. As much as I like Bellerin, I think after his first season and a half that he made his name known, he's kind of started to understand that he is talented, and I don't think he puts in the same effort. I mean, I remember when there wasn't a player in the league that could outrun him, and, you know, watching the Chelsea preseason game, he had a 17-year-old that was just turning him in knots. Lichtsteiner brings the experience, brings the championship pedigree, and we saw it in the preseason game. He's a bit nasty, which I like. You know, Arsenal's been a culprit of a team that isn't nasty enough, doesn't have enough cutting edge, doesn't have enough real bold steel, and I think Lichtsteiner is like that. Every team needs that bad guy. As much as we hate to say the other side of the game, the other side of the whistle, but every team needs that bad guy, and I really, really like him the most. Even though he's 34, I believe, turning 35, I think he's going to be a really strong signing for the Premier League. I think he's still got enough in the tank, at least for one, if not two seasons, to continue, you know, beaming up that line, putting the good crosses in. Bellerin's crossing ability is suspect at best. You know, he's really pacey is his best aspect, and I don't think he's been that in years. The other thing is, and I tweeted about this the other day, for a team that's blessed with a ton of strong center mids, no real winger talent outside of maybe Aubameyang from his younger years and maybe Mkhitaryan, I don't know why we're not seeing a 4-1-2-1-2 with both Lacazette and Aubameyang up top and letting our fullbacks be our width. I don't really see a 4-2-3-1 being the strongest thing for us, putting a 50 million pound poacher style striker out on the left. I don't think that's going to be a strong lineup for us, but it seems like that's what Emery's first choice has been throughout the Premier League, or excuse me, throughout the preseason. Overall, if I had to rate the summer, I would say A-, just because we got the business done early. Maybe it's just Arsenal's social media team, but they look like they're putting in a lot of work preparing for the season. Everything that I read and have watched about Unai Emery was his teams work hard, which is something that I also think we've missed in recent years. So I'm very excited to see the work rate that we're going to put in. The thing I'm most disappointed about, and I know we'll talk about it later, Aaron Ramsey. I mean, if he's going to be valued as much as we value him in the center of the park, just pay the man. You know, give him whatever he wants. He's having twins, you know, this season. His wife obviously is not going to want to leave London. Just pay the man. Just get it done. Give him the armband and let it be done. We don't need to get caught into yet another, you know, will he, won't he sign situation that we've been in with Alexis and Meza and Samir Nasri and Fabregas and RVP. It's the same old thing when it comes to running down the contracts. If he's not going to sign, sell him. If he's negotiating, pay him what he wants. But overall, I think we had a good summer, and I'm excited to see how the season starts out against City this weekend.
And Ian, for you, like looking at the summer as it's unfolded, because we talked about a month ago, nothing really new in terms of transfers, but you have seen a lot of some of the preseason games that have been available on TV. You've seen the stuff that's been on the social media. You know, assuming we don't add someone tomorrow, and we don't know that for a fact, that the club could surprise us. How are you rating the summer now that you've had that extra month to kind of think about it and kind of see how the club's lined up in preseason games?
I'll be a little honest. I'm a little disappointed that we haven't added a wide player. Like Zach, you touched on that. It's kind of the one real weak spot where we don't have a lot of players. As far as an overall view on how the summer went, I mean, I said it on the pod the last time I was on. What more can you ask for? I mean, we were calling for a new goalkeeper. We got one. We're calling for another center back. We got one. Hey, I mean, yes, you certainly can argue over whether or not he's the right one. We said we needed right back cover for Bellerin. We got that. We needed a defensive midfielder that can cover ground and put in a tackle. We got that. I mean, as far as filling needs on what was supposed to be a limited budget this year, you know, all the reports came out that we didn't have that much money to spend on transfers. I think they've done an exceptional job filling the needs. Now, on Socrates, there's a little bit of concern there for me. I feel like that was a Sven Mislintat transfer, and now these links with Vida and potentially another center back coming in. That's probably, to me, that's Emery saying, look, this guy is going to be a solid squad player. He can be effective, but he's not going to be good enough for what we need. I'm not going to attribute that to a panic buy. I just think it's Emery not being, just saying, I don't think he's good enough, and looking to move to find somebody who's going to fit. Again, that to me is not a sign of dysfunction. That to me is a sign that they're working well together. Now we're leaving a little bit late considering tomorrow is the deadline. And I know it's one of those things where we've kind of asked for it in the past to have business closed sooner, but that was when we waited until the very end to do all of our business. And we had no transfers in by the time, we got to games. So we were weak there. Now that we did business early, I kind of wish we had a few more weeks to kind of settle everything out. So, the thing to me, it's, I can't complain about the business that we've done. The big thing that was going around a couple of days ago was with the loan deal of Callum Chambers. Quite frankly, I'm not convinced. I'm not nearly as convinced about him as most people are. Alex, I know we kind of had a conversation with this on Twitter the other day. Mm-hmm. I'm not convinced with him at all. I think he's incredibly error prone, both on the ball, his passes, and his concentration. I don't see him as being any more reliable than Socrates or Mustafi. So, I think that was, to me, that's one of those things where he wasn't going to get as much game time as he wanted. And I think he said, look, I want to go on loan. People were concerned, you're kind of confused about then why would they extend him? It's to Zach's point. There's a change in attitude, a change in tactics, if you will, as far as how we're going to be addressing these contracts moving forward. I think it's a good sign that we extended him, that we extended Iwobi. We've got Reece Nelson locked down. It's a different type of situation, but we're keeping guys under contract and giving us a chance to decide what to do with them. The nice thing is that when Chambers comes back from loan, we can still sell him. He's not going to walk for free. It's not going to be a Serge Gnabry, or whatever, however you say his last name. It's not going to be a situation like that where he comes back from loan and his contract is up and he can leave for free. So for me, I would like to see a little bit more done at center back. I don't think Socrates is the right fit, but you can only get so much when you are working with a limited budget.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll start with the center back topic because that I think that's kind of the issue that most Arsenal fans right now are concerned about with Socrates. And I think we might have touched on it in a previous podcast, but it was just a deal that was easy to do, in my opinion. And it was, obviously Sven knows Borussia Dortmund. He's the one who brought Socrates there. He knew roughly the value it would cost. He knew that it was a guy that could come in and provide leadership and experience. My issue with Socrates is, having watched him at Dortmund, he had a really bad season last season. And he looked a step slower. He was reacting slower, and he was quite error prone. And, Dortmund fans weren't exactly brokenhearted to see him leave. I do think, the fact that he can mentor Mavropanos is a benefit. I mean, you can't understate how big culturally that is to come to a new country, but have someone from your country there to kind of help guide you, especially when you're a young player. So I think that's a potential asset. Mustafi, at the beginning of the summer, I would have said he was gone, but I just think it would have been tough to unload him and get any real value for him, because you paid 35 million to get him. So I don't think you're ever going to get rid of him. My thing with Chambers is, he had a full season at Middlesbrough where he got game time. Yes, he didn't play tons towards the beginning of last season, but towards the end, he really, in my opinion, he started to come on. I think he's a better distributor of the ball than he gets credit for, and I think he shows some decent composure on the ball. He's shown it a few times in preseason too, even when it was pushed out wide. And it didn't quite make sense to me how, if something were to happen to Mustafi or Socrates, your next man up is Rob Holding, and then you have Mavropanos, who's played three Premier League games. And I think you're kind of stuck in a hole now where you're basically hoping for those two to stay healthy. But if either of them has a downturn in form, you are in a little bit of a panic. So, I like Rob Holding. I think he still has room to grow, but I think Chambers is the more complete article at this point, but maybe it is true that he pushed for the loan to get game time, and maybe starting at Fulham, he'd probably play alongside Tim Ream or Alfie Mawson, I think, the other guy that Fulham signed. So, maybe he'll get some game time there, and hopefully he comes back to better. In regards to the other deals that we did, the Torreira deal, I think we're all in complete agreement that was a real steal at the value we got him for. You're getting a potential world-class defensive midfielder for 30 million. And I think that's kind of the range that I like to see us go into the market, 23 and under with big upside, but still having proven themselves in a top league. So I think he's a real steal. Lichtsteiner, Zach, you mentioned it, and also Ian, you mentioned it, just having that right back cover to where now Bellerin doesn't have to start every game, and I think maybe you see more out of Bellerin because he doesn't have to conserve energy knowing he's going to play every single game of the season, and you're not sticking Maitland-Niles there now. I think other than that, I think Leno, I've seen some good things in preseason. I think I've seen an increased level of concentration there. And I think he certainly is quicker to react than Czech. So I'm hoping he gets the number one spot, even if he doesn't have the number one jersey. But the surprise for me this summer, and I can say this not knowing anything about him coming in, was Matteo Guendouzi. I think he's been kind of the revelation of Arsenal's summer on the field in terms of being far more developed and further along than I anticipated. Great composure on the ball, good under the press, doesn't get phased, passing range, very impressive, can spot a run. I think there's huge upside there, and I think that is kind of what I was expecting from Sven Mislintat, those types of signings that other clubs haven't necessarily had their eye on this kid, but, he's 19, so he still has major upside. And then, one other thing before I, move on to a different area that, Ian, you mentioned the contract situation. And I think that was a great point, that I like seeing the club tie down assets long-term. So, Emil Smith-Rowe had a couple good preseason games. We locked him down. Rumors are that Reece Nelson should be locked down pretty soon. Callum Chambers at Holding, they're still young and they're center backs, so they peak a little later. So tying them down is good. Iwobi, Xhaka. So even if these guys don't necessarily pan out, if you do sell them, you have some leverage. So you're not getting £5 million like you're getting for Lucas Perez or 1 million for David Ospina. You're not stuck offloading guys for these crazy fees. Although, obviously the wages are part of that too. But when you look at the squad as a whole, and Ian, I'll start with you, and then Zach, feel free to chime in. Where are you seeing the strengths? Where are you seeing the weaknesses? One area that has kind of crossed my mind a little bit is the left back situation, because Monreal's getting up there. I know we talked about Lichtsteiner, but Monreal is going to be in a position where he's going to have to start a lot more with Kolasinac out for at least 2 months. And then, maybe, Maitland-Niles might even end up starting this weekend. So that's an area for me that is a little bit questionable. I think there's some depth in the middle of the park and in attack. Just curious to see how all those pieces work out. But Ian, where are your kind of strengths and weaknesses of the squad as it's currently constructed?
Yeah, we've kind of been over the weaknesses, really. We can all agree that the back line is the biggest concern. In the midfield and going forward, I quite frankly, we're as strong a side as any other team in the Premier League as far as midfield and forwards. City's got more depth in that area, but I look at the names when you put down on a team sheet, and I think we're going to score some goals this year. I'm a little concerned. Really, my big concern with the back line is because we're going to play a more pressing style game. That's going to put our defenders in more one-on-one situations when that press does get beat, and that's really where my big concern comes in. The concern is the defense, and strengths, it's midfield and going and forwards.
Zach, what about you?
Exactly the same. I think Mustafi is the weakest center back in the top six. I think for all the screaming and yelling that he does on the field, his end product as a defender is very poor. Let's all not forget, we haven't mentioned this yet. Koscielny will be back at some point, even with his Achilles problem. He's probably the best center back we have. Um, but I still think center back is going to be the hardest part or the roughest part of our season all the way through, especially these first couple of games where we're playing City and Chelsea, both teams that like to attack, like to put the ball through, especially with De Bruyne, Willian, playing these kind of looping balls over the top or through the lines. I'm really worried about that. We do have as much striking talent as we've had since RVP was in his best, 18 months with us or further back, during the golden years with Henri. We've got as much striking talent as we've had in as long as I've been a fan, if we line up correctly, obviously. I think the midfield is kind of suspect only because I don't think they're used to playing this pressing style. Not that they're not technically gifted. I don't think that they're used to playing this pressing style. Ramsey can keep up. Torreira can. I don't think Xhaka can. I just don't think Xhaka's got the legs for it. Ozil's not going to press as the other midfield guy. Ozil's just kind of, do what Ozil does. I love him. He puts a ball on a platter 99 times out of 100, but he's not going to press. But the biggest thing I'm worried about, obviously, is center back. Left back, you're absolutely right. Kolasinac with a left knee, 2 months out, and then that's 2 months to start training, so it could be 3 months. Monreal's getting up there in age. Ainsley Maitland-Niles, I'm very, very impressed in what I have seen from him. I like his versatility to be able to play left back, but we've seen a lot of kids come up through the Arsenal youth ranks that were versatile that never really got to play in their preferred role and never really got to lock that down. I see a lot of potential in him, but he really needs to be given some shirt time or some minutes in that center midfield role where he wants to be. Aside from that, I absolutely agree about Bellerin, knowing that he's not going to have to play every single game and every single minute with no one behind him. He'll be able to run more. He'll be able to make those long bursting runs. And he'll be able to sub off if he's dead at the end of a Europa League game. Or if we have one of those Thursday, Sunday runs and everybody's just dead, he'll be able to take some time after the break. So I think the best thing that we've done, or the best thing that we have, obviously, is going forward. I just hope we score more goals than we concede.
And I think, Ian, you brought up the point about the pressing with the center backs. I think that's a really interesting point in that we're going to be pressing so much higher up the pitch. And I think that puts a lot of strain on your center backs. And when your center backs have a tendency to lunge in and leave space behind, you are going to run into issues. Now, you've got a guy like Torreira who can clean up a lot of messes. And I think that's a big plus. But you're still putting a lot of pressure on the rest of your team to compensate for your center backs there. And I don't think either one, Mustafi is a decent passer. Socrates is not a fantastic passer. So you're still relying on Xhaka, especially to kind of be that, be the guy who builds it from deep.
I'm going to jump in just on that point, which is something that's an interesting thing that I've seen in the preseason, talking about building out of the back. One of the things that Emery's had us doing is our center back splitting and dropping Torreira into the middle to start the build-up. So under Emery, he's not asking the center backs to make that first pass like we had seen in the past with Wenger. He's having one of those center midfielders, whether it was Guendouzi or Torreira. Xhaka did it a little bit, but I think he's not – I don't know if he's quite the guy that we need for that. But Torreira and Guendouzi did it quite a lot. Where they dropped deep, almost even with the center backs to receive the ball, and they were the ones that started the build-up out of the back. So I think that should kind of ease that issue with our center backs not being great passing out of the back.
Well, I think, if that is the case, then with Xhaka, I think a lot of his problems last season came because he was so isolated and because he was the one guy who was able to kind of dictate. Because yes, we didn't have the center backs splitting quite as much, but there was still so much of a load placed on him. I think if you can alleviate that, where he's not isolated quite to the extent that he is, then I think you see the best out of him. I mean, I will say the midfield situation as a whole, and Zach, I'd be curious to get your take first, but How do you, I mean, do you mentioned playing a 4-2-1-2, no, 4-1-2-1-2. Sorry, there's a lot of numbers. Is that, that potentially works as a midfield diamond. Is that the best way to get, Ramsey, Xhaka, Torreira, Ozil all on the pitch, or do you just have to accept someone sitting on the bench? Because the other issue is, if you play a 4-2-3-1 and you're playing Aubameyang wide, you're basically asking one of the best strikers in the world to track back as a left winger, and I think that eliminates your possibility as a midfield to hit those balls over the top to Aubameyang, and that's where he thrived at Dortmund. You quick turnover of the ball, hit it up to Aubameyang, let him use his pace and his finishing ability.
Yes, he is such a clinical finisher that it's almost a waste of his talent to put him out wide. And, he does track back. He's not going to be that type of, player that's just going to, I don't want to do it like Alexis or something like that. But I think it's absolutely wasting his talent. With the diamond, whether it's a 4-3-1-2 or the 4-1-2-1-2, it capitalizes on our strength. Lucas Torreira being able to run between the lines and really drop in deep and help the center backs. That'll be the linchpin, allowing Xhaka and Ramsey to be those connecting players. Xhaka playing the long balls, Ramsey box to box, and then Ozil will be freed up to be Ozil, is the best way I'm going to describe that. If Ozil has no defensive responsibility, we always see the best out of him. The only player missing out of that in that formation is going to be Mkhitaryan, which I do like him and I do appreciate him. But I don't think he pushes any of those players out of the lineup unless maybe Xhaka's really having a really bad season. You change it up a little bit, maybe a 4-3-3, and you put Ozil out to the wide right because he likes to cut in, and you let Mkhitaryan as that number 10 type of role. But that's the only player that we're really missing in that formation. One thing I want to touch on what Ian said, yes, the center backs have been splitting, and Guendouzi and Xhaka and Torreira coming back to get the ball. But if you've also noticed, when our deepest lying central midfielders coming that far deep to get the ball, we're taking on a lot of pressure. And we're only going to be opening ourselves up for a mistake in one of those typical Arsenal goals to give up, on just one simple play, one simple nicked ball, one bad pass. Let's say Torreira drops in, plays the ball out to Socrates, who we all agree is not the best ball player, and he gives it away, then our center backs are so split, our midfield will be pushed up and we'll be getting pressed. I think it's a very, very slippery slope to have our center backs squeezing out like that or pushing out like that, having our center midfielder coming that far deep.
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly something, and it is going to happen. We're going to see some growing pains with it. But the way I see him setting up the team, we've seen Emery put us out in a 4-3-3 quite a bit. We've seen him throw a 4-4-2 even. He changed it because he didn't like how it went. I see, quite frankly, I see us lining up kind of in a hybrid between the two. It's not going to be quite as structured as a 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2. More of a lopsided 4-3-3, if you want to call it that, with almost a 4-2-2-2 with two kind of central holding midfielders, two attacking, slightly wider midfielders, and then two strikers. Like I said, it's not going to be exactly that because you will see Aubameyang kind of out to the left channel a little bit more as well. Ozil kind of on the right wing will tuck inside a little bit more. The thing about that is it should, in theory, if it's being played right, once the system is kind of figured out by all the guys on the field, it should prevent Torreira, when he does drop deep, from being isolated. And you're right, we did see that issue happen kind of in preseason where he would get the ball and everybody else was too far up the field. And that's, to me, that's growing pains. That's something that, they should be able to work through. And I think the setup, if that is the way that they set up, that should alleviate it because Xhaka should always be somewhere close by to give Torreira an option. You're out. If it's played correctly, there should be the support there. And like you said, we are going to have some issues with it because it is a completely different system than we've played in the past. And there's going to be a learning curve with it. But if you can execute it, it certainly can be very effective.
And I think the thing with Xhaka as well is that for as much as I wanted it to work, Xhaka and Ramsey as the pivot just didn't work. I think Ramsey's natural inclination is play a lot higher up the pitch, which in turn let Xhaka expose. His lack of pace then kind of came to the forefront at times, and the fact that he can't really turn on the ball quickly. So when he got pressed, either he got caught on the ball or he passed it back to the center backs. I think having a player like Torreira who is very quick on the ball, he's kind of got that the quick feet to kind of get out of tight situations and knows how to use his body. I think that is going to allow Jock a little bit more space where he's not pressed and he can hit those balls over the top if he needs to. So I think, and the other thing is, Emery's only been training these guys for about a month now. And so you're not going to see this complete radical overhaul in how the club plays. I mean, it's just not humanly possible. Obviously you'll do different drills and you'll be taught different concepts, especially defensively, but you're not going to see every player improve 100% on what they were. You might notice some things here and there, but it's going to be a slow and gradual process. And I guess, unfortunately for Emery, that process starts with the defending champions at home this Sunday, Manchester City. Kind of transitioning into that, what's your predicted lineup and what's your prediction on how that game's going to unfold? For me, I think it's probably going to be some variation of what you said, Ian, with Lacazette, Aubameyang, and then Ozil, Ramsey behind, Xhaka, Torreira. Maitland-Niles will probably start on the left because I don't think Monreal's fit yet. Although I don't know about Xhaka Torreira, that's the other thing because they just got back, a little over a week and a half ago. So that's a little bit of an area of concern. I think you see Socrates, Mustafi, Bellerin. I have a feeling Czech is going to start. I don't know why. That's just my gut feeling. I would love for it to be Lino, but I just think he might go a Czech for experience sake, even though I think that can be a little overrated. I got to admit that I don't have the best feeling about this game. I think it came about 2-3 weeks too early, although, hopefully, as far as I know, De Bruyne won't be playing. I don't know about Sterling either. So, maybe we take advantage of that to some extent, but I think City probably edge us out 2-1 is my feeling at this point. But Zach, what about you? Which kind of your predicted lineup and how you think the game's going to unfold?
Well, I guess the question will be my predicted or the lineup that I want. Those are, for me, completely different things.
Predicted lineup.
I'm with you. I think Czech is going to get the nod, even though I would like to see Leno start, just based on experience. Left back, probably Ainsley Maitland-Niles, although I don't really sign on to the belief of getting back into shape. I mean, these are professional players. They should be able to take a month and keep themselves in shape. That's my personal view. Socrates and Mustafi at the back, Bellerin on the right, just because I don't think after one preseason game and very limited training, Lichtsteiner's made enough of a mark. Torreira, Xhaka, Ramsey, Ozil, Lacazette, and Aubameyang, I think is gonna round it out.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the same guys, kind of how I explained it a little bit earlier. Sorry, I don't think we got a prediction. I'll come back to you to get what your score prediction for the game. But yeah, I agree. Same guys on the pitch. I do think it's going to be Czech. I wish it would be Leno, but it's going to take a little bit of time, I think, before we see him brought into the team. I am curious to see tactically how they play it. I would really like him to see it kind of play it as that 4-4-2 or that 4-2-2-2, if you want to call it that. But, we'll see. I'm really interested. I think it's going to be a really good test against City. If you're going to play City, it's, in my opinion, the best time to play them because they did get a lot of guys that came back late. Honestly, there's no good time to play them. I mean, they're easily the most stacked team in the Premier League. So let's get them early. I think it's going to be a fun game. I see it 2-2. High-paced, up and down, a lot of chances, a lot of missed chances. I think it's going to be a hell of a fun watch. And I could see it going 2-2.
Yeah, no, I forgot about the prediction there. Honestly, I think you're absolutely right. Playing them this early in the season when they're not all fully back, they're not all really mindset on City without De Bruyne. I think we can actually edge out a 3-2. It's a bold prediction, but I think playing them this early in the season when they're not gelling and flowing as we all know they can is going to be our best opportunity to nick some points off the champions.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I'm wrong about pretty much everything. So if I predict us to lose, it might actually work out because I'm pretty sure I predicted us to finish second last season. So I'm going to do the reverse of everything I did last season. So I'm going to go ahead and pick us to lose. But it's a great way to open the season for a fan, especially given all the on the field issues that, we just kind of want to wrap up the podcast with some thoughts on the Stan Kroenke and Ivan Gazidis situation. However, I mean, that kind of has arisen within the past 2-3 days, and for those who don't know, Alisher Usmanov, who's the minority shareholder at Arsenal, accepted an offer from Stan Kroenke to buy him out of his shares. What that means, practically speaking, is that Stan Kroenke will then be able to buy out all the rest of the shareholders as well. A lot of those which were family-owned shares, lineage shares. So he's going to own 100% of those shares, which means he has the ability to take the club private. And it means that he can pay himself dividends. A lot of the financial reporting requirements don't necessarily apply to private companies. He claims that he's got ambition to run this club, to win titles, to compete at the top. I mean, I'm curious to get your guys' take on that, and kind of what's working hand in hand with that is this rumor that I'd imagine is only going to ramp up now that Ivan Gazidis is potentially headed to AC Milan. That, to me, when I first heard it, was before the Kroenke news, and it didn't make sense that someone who was clearly waiting for Wenger to leave would then set up this structure where he's clearly the guy. He was at the forefront of every press conference. He was the guy who made sure everyone knew who he was. He set up this structure with the director of football and the head of recruitment and the head of contract negotiations. And then all of a sudden he's headed to Milan. But apparently they're offering him major money. But now this Kroenke news has come out. Maybe he saw the writing on the wall that Stan was going to push for Josh to kind of take the lead. Again, this is all hearsay. We don't really know what the plan is, but I think it's not too hard to put 2 and 2 together here and think Stan's taking 100%. His son he's always mentioned his son wanted to get more involved in the club. Ian, I mean, from a fan perspective, I think it's, for me at least, and I would love for you to touch on this, it's slightly romantic to hold on to this idea of like, oh, well, now the fans have no say and this and that. I mean, realistically, most of these clubs are owned by oligarchs or, single owners. I know that the Supporters Trust was up in arms about this. So, are we just being too romantic, or is, it's just the modern game? And what's kind of your feeling on the Kroenke and Gazidis situation?
The word you used to describe it was perfect, romantic. The fans owned, what was it? I believe 3% of the shares.
Something like that.
That's not the exact number. It's something similar to that. So what impact did they really have other than being able to go to the AGMs and ask questions? I'm looking at this from a completely business point of view. I'm not looking at it from, the fan perspective where, a family has owned shares for a long time and they're passed on from generation to generation. I'm not looking at it from that perspective because, quite frankly, I don't have that perspective. I'm obviously here in America. I didn't grow up with Arsenal in my backyard. I didn't grow up with shares in my family of Arsenal. So the only way I can look at it is from a business point of view. My take, I think, is a little bit different than a lot of other people's out there. I don't think that Kroenke, taking 100% of the club is going to be a bad thing. Quite frankly, sure. Is it a little bit easier for him to kind of take a little bit of money off and pay himself dividends, yes, that is certainly something that could happen. I mean, but if he takes $3 million like he did before, I mean, honestly, for a club that's worth $1.8 billion, is $3 million really something that's going to make that big of a difference? I personally don't care. That happens everywhere. That's just business. And that's what sports is. That's what every big club, every big club in the world is. It's a business. It started off as, I heard Tim Stillman talking about the book, his new book about the history of Arsenal and how Arsenal started. And it's a really cool story about how it started. But that's not what it is anymore. This is big business, right? The goal is to make money. So when you look at it from that perspective, look at what the Kroenkes own, right? They own a whole bunch of sports franchises, a bunch of them, the majority of them in the US. The thing about US sports franchises is they're all salary capped. So you can only, the amount you spend is kind of capped, but also the amount that you can make in a way is capped. The values of your franchises can only go so far because the leagues are set up to create parity and to keep teams as even as possible. And there isn't anywhere else to grow. There's nowhere to grow bigger than that one league itself. The thing about Arsenal that sets it aside from everything else in their portfolio is that they could go from being worth 1.8 billion to being worth 3.5. They could take Arsenal, and if they invest the money, because how do you become a big club? A Barcelona, Real Madrid, a Bayern Munich, Juventus, like you win shit. And how do you win shit in this game today? You have to put money into it, right? I can't sit here and say the Kroenkes are dumb business people. They're obviously not. Look at what they're doing. They're building sports franchises. They're worth a crap ton of money. They know what they're doing when it comes to business. I don't think that they're going to look at Arsenal and say, you know what, we're going to keep it status quo. We're going to keep making the money that we are. They're going to see this, at least they should, in my opinion, see it as an opportunity to, take their $1.8 billion worth and just blow that up and make it worth so much more money.
But shouldn't they have seen that already? Because for all intents and purposes, they've controlled the club this long, even with Usmanov.
That's yes, they could have. But let me put it to you this way: if you knew that at some point in time you were going to buy the entire club, you were going to buy out the remaining 35% of the club. If you put all that money in, if you put a whole bunch of money in ahead of time, you're only going to see 66% of that return. Because the other 33% of that return of your increased revenue is going to the other shareholders. It's going to Usmanov and it's going to the supporters who own shares. Now that they own 100% of the club, or now that they will own 100% of the club, 100% of that revenue comes back to them, to the club. They're not sharing it. They're not sharing 33% of it with somebody else. So they're able to buy out the rest of the club at a lower price, and they're going to get more of that revenue. Now, I'm not a business person. I'm just looking at it from, the way I see it, a common sense approach. And I could be wrong, but I don't see, you mentioned Josh Kroenke. I think he's the one that we're going to see really step in and have more of an impact on the club than Stan. Stan's got his LA project going, and that's where he wants to be. He wants to be on his ranch, and he wants to deal with his LA project. Josh is the guy that, he's younger. I'm going to assume he's more ambitious. They talked about wanting to be ambitious and put money into the club. I guess I just don't see it as a bad thing.
So I'm not going to wholeheartedly disagree with you, Ian, but I am going to slightly. And to give you context before I present this, I work in finance myself and investing, and I also have a small interest in a local soccer club back where I'm from in Alabama. So I can understand the aspect of running a business versus running a sports franchise. But let's look at it like this. Yes, all of his franchises in the United States are salary cap. That's accurate. However, let's look at how they're performing. The Nuggets, the Avalanche, the Rams, none of them are really doing anything. None of them are making any strides to get better. Golden State just got better out of nowhere. They were, 5-7 years ago, nobody was a Golden State fan. They're making moves in a salary cap league, paying the luxury tax or what have you. So I think that this move is a move to benefit Stan Kroenke, Josh Kroenke, KSC. It's a move to benefit them on a personal wealth level. I don't think it's a move to benefit the club. Even with 100% ownership, like you said, Alex, they've already had a controlling interest. Even though they're only getting a 66% return, they still haven't put the money in to increase what return they're getting, even at 66%. I don't think this move in any way, is going to benefit Arsenal as a whole. Yeah, I think you're right with Arsenal supporters only owning 3%. It is kind of a romance idea that what we really said mattered. I even looked at buying a share one day until I found out the price tag of one. But I mean, you're right. I mean, the Arsenal supporters really didn't own any kind of interest in it other than being able to go to the AGM. But from personal experience, caring too much about the business and not enough about the sporting side isn't going to lead us to where we want to be as a club. And I think they're more worried about the business and their own bottom line, creating their own wealth and their own income from it, taking money out of it versus dumping money into it. I think if he was going to dump money into the club, he would have did it already when he had Arsene Wenger at the helm. Now that he's got a new manager, a completely new leadership style, why would he do it now? And that's kind of the second point I want to make is it's very surprising to me that even Gazidis is leaving or potentially leaving the club after all these years of being in Wenger's shadow. He's finally got the role he wants. Why would he wait till now to do this when he's finally, 6 months, 7 months gotten into the position he wants to be in? It's very surprising that he wants to leave. Maybe he did see the writing on the wall that Stan wants his son Josh to be in charge. For me, though, if Gazidis leaves, the ideal replacement running the day-to-day would be Raul Sanyehi, not Josh Kroenke. I don't know if he would get that appointment, but he's the only one with the true footballing knowledge. Yeah, Josh Kroenke grew up in a family that is heavily invested into sports franchises, but I don't think he's ever ran one himself. And like I said, I can't drill it home enough. None of the Kroenke-owned franchises are top performers. They're teams that do just enough to make just enough income or just enough to move to LA and get that new stadium or what have you. They're not putting money into them regardless. They're more about their own self-interest than I think they are about Arsenal being a world beater. Because, 10, 12 years ago we were. Now, we're not. And I don't think Kroenke's being 100% owner is going to get us back there.
Yeah, and it's interesting, just looking at the numbers that are coming out. He is taking out like a $550 million loan. Granted, there was some language in the credit documents that, he couldn't leverage the club to pay that back. In other words, there are things in place to prevent him from exclusively using the revenue of the club to pay back the loan. But at the same time, obviously, practically speaking, that is going to happen to some extent, especially with interest payments that he's going to be paying for the next few years, especially rather than the principal on the loan. So the point you brought up of the franchises underperforming, I think it's what a lot of people in England have pointed to, because I think we all kind of have the unique perspective of the American side. And Ian, you brought it up, like all the teams here are franchises, they're not clubs. So they do have these certain restrictions, and with salary cap restrictions and things of that nature, you have to have really good front office management to be able to distinguish yourself, to be able to make those moves. And Ian, I know you can attest to this as a hockey fan, especially with the salary cap. You really have to be able to find role players, and you have to be able to utilize your resources. But at the same time, to have so many franchises in so many different realms of American sport and have them all be very, very mediocre. And now you have the situation with the Kroenkes moving the Rams to LA. That all the fear that raised. There is cause for concern, and so I certainly see why a lot of people who grew up with the club see this as a huge step back, having a single owner. My playing devil's advocate to that, and Ian, it kind of goes to your point. I don't know practically how much is going to change from what is already being operated. I think realistically, I don't think Stan's going to put tons more or tons less money into the club. What I will say is that with Arsene Wenger gone, his scapegoat is gone. I think Arsene Wenger really shouldered the blame for a lot of the internal issues with the club. So if Wenger goes and Gazidis goes, all the pressure is on Kroenke. Now, granted, he spends most of his time in the U.S., so he might not feel that pressure. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I want to give you guys a chance to get kind of some final thoughts in on this before we wrap up. And Zach, I'll throw it to you.
I mean, you're right. Wenger was the prototypical manager, figurehead, whatever you want to call it. He took the blame for what happened. And I think that led to a lot of stability in the recent years of underperformance, of the new stadium years, because he took that responsibility, took his players out of the line of fire a lot of times in the media. It really overshadowed everything. And because he doesn't have that scapegoat now, it's all on him. And aside from that, I mean, I can't drill home the previous point any harder. It's, the dividend that he's paying himself isn't making a difference, but I don't foresee any kind of new investment, new running of the club, or anything new aside from if Gazidis leaves, and we'll see how that goes. Which, if the main guy in charge of the club leaves the week before the season starts, it's going to be one of the worst pieces of business, going into a brand new season that we could possibly imagine. And then we can all imagine how the season will go past that, and then what will be blamed at the end of the season when we finish 5th or 6th or 7th.
And Ian, what's your take on the Gazidis situation? Because you didn't really touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it could be a couple things. It could be, there's rumors that Milan is offering him a percentage of, shares in the club, or a percentage of what the club gets sold for when it gets sold. We don't know what they're offering him. They could be offering him something that is just way too good to pass up. We don't really know. He could be leaving because of Kroenke taking over. Maybe Josh is taking a bigger role. I can't really comment on it too much because I don't know why he's leaving. I think as long as, assuming he does leave, as long as the club relies on the structure that is in place with Raul and Mislintat, I think we'll be okay. Again, there's, quite frankly, I don't know if Gazidis, other than getting these guys in place, did a great job in that role. The commercial deals that we have, the kit sponsorships, the contracts with Puma, and they're always less than the other top clubs. So I'm not necessarily convinced that him leaving is a bad thing. The timing of it's not a good thing, that's for sure. It's the timing obviously isn't a good thing, but when you're dealing with a transaction, the size as far as the sale of the shares, I don't know necessarily that there's much choice as far as the timing of it. There's just a couple other things that I did want to kind of put out there about Kroenke. One of the things about in U.S. franchises, there is only so much you can do. The big issue that I think that a lot of their U.S. teams have, they haven't put the right people in charge of the sports operation part of it. They haven't put the right general managers in. They haven't put the right coaches in to run those clubs. Now, they certainly could invest more money. We've seen that. They've always been slightly more on the stingy side when it comes to investing in that. But I don't see. I guess I see it as they have a tendency to not put the right people in charge to run the day-to-day of their, the sports side of their franchises. And I think that's why they struggle. But, I certainly could be wrong in that regard. As far as what it means for Arsenal, I'm not necessarily convinced that they are going to dump a whole lot more money into the club. My point really is that it's not going to change. They're not instantly going to start taking all of the profits for themselves. That's not going to happen. It's at worst case scenario for me, it's going to pretty much stay the same, where we can't compete with City, Chelsea, and United and Liverpool in spending. Our counterparts are, as far as spending, Tottenham, Everton, or like Tottenham and Everton. Like those are the teams we compete against as far as spending. That's the worst case. So it doesn't change too much from where we are currently. The best case scenario is that they see this now as an opportunity. They look at like the opportunity I explained earlier about what they could turn Arsenal into. That's my hope, that now that they are a single, it's going to be one entity, one group owning the club, that it's going to give them a singular direction. Not that it wasn't before, but I think it could potentially clear up the road to that happening.
That's an excellent point. That's an absolute excellent point. What you made about they don't put the right people in charge. I think that would be the biggest fear that we have is not having the right people in charge to take us to the next level, and the continued, not mediocrity, we're not mediocre at all, but the continued lack of success that we've realized since the three of us have supported the club. So I guess that would be more of a realistic fear than anything else, because exactly what you're saying, they, at their American clubs, or franchises, they don't ever put the right people in charge to make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's where maybe the hope is that Gazidis has already put those guys in charge, and so now the Kroenke's job is just not to mess it up. Because I think Sanyehi, from everything I've read, is a very astute guy. I think Mislintat's a smart guy. Having a contract negotiator like Husfami, whatever. There, you have these very delineated jobs. So it is a question of who's going to take on that CEO role. And Ian, you brought up a good point about the commercial deals. It really does seem like we've kind of been bottom of the barrel in terms of the so-called bigger clubs in the world of negotiating these deals and the kit deals, the sleeve deals, official sponsorships and things like that. All that money matters when it comes to a transfer budget. Yes, your transfer budget is not dictated by shirt sales. I think everyone knows that, but it all adds up. And the other thing I would just want to end on this is that I think it's, people think making the Champions League is just, important for prestige. Financially, it's largely important. The reason we're operating on this so-called $50 to $70 million £1 million budget is because we're not in the Champions League. We're not getting that revenue. It also alters the types of players you can bring in unless you're offering mega wages. Yes, United brought in Pogba the year they were in the Europa League, but they also offered him ungodly wages. By and large, teams that are not in the Champions League can't afford to do that. So you need to be able to attract that type of player. So I think the key this season is to get back into the Champions League and then start, bringing in the revenue again and start making Arsenal one of the top 10 clubs in the world. But I want to wrap up there because I know we've been gone on for a while. But Zach, what we usually do is just throw out our Twitter handles for everyone and how they can reach us and give us some feedback on what we're doing. So how can the folks find you on Twitter? Zach, did we lose your fit? I think we lost Zach for a second.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
hey,
Ian,
Zach, you're muted there, buddy.
We got Zach back. Okay.
Sorry about that. At Mr. Prez XII.
And that's Prez with a Z, right?
Yes, that's right.
All right. And Ian, how can the folks find you on Twitter?
At GunnersFan6.
Yep. And then you can find me at UFGoonerAJ. You can find the podcast at Eurosnob Pod. Facebook.com/EurosnobPod. Subscribe on iTunes. Give us good ratings on iTunes. Tell your friends, and certainly, we'll do a lot more of these over the season than we did during the summer, just because there's more to talk about and hopefully better things to talk about. But Ian, as always, good to talk to you, my friend, and Zach, was great to have you on, and hopefully we can have you on again during the season.
It was absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to it.
All right. Take it easy, guys.
Cheers.
I will sign it off for us.